Hello, Sydney here. Welcome to the Drunken Ork. I've recently done some terrain. I've wanted to do this terrain for a while now. I've had the idea fizzling away for a good few months. I just never got round to it. The first time I've done terrain, well, no, that's not true. I did paint the stuff from the Kill Team box. It's the first time I've built my own terrain from scratch. I think it's this hanging round with that Clint fella from Essex Boys. His passion for terrain's just rubbed off on us. So I decided to do something because the 40k Ork Community on Discord and Facebook, their monthly challenge during February was the February Terrain Challenge. So I thought, nice, I'll get doing that. Now the idea was, I bought this large block of polystyrene, and it is a large block, and I basically wanted to make a mountain. Not out of a molehill like I normally do, but out of that polystyrene. I had been collecting bits of polystyrene from packing, you know, things like we've got a new oven and a new TV. So I was collecting all those bits of polystyrene, and although they were quite large and interesting in shape, like walls and barricades sort of thing, well, forts really, not much cop for a mountain. So I got that one block. Now I thought if I cut it in half, I can make two. So if you look about there, let's get out the road for you, there we go. There's the other half. That's the half I cut off. Now I didn't take any photos when I was cutting the polystyrene, or any film, because quite frankly it was maddening, and yeah, I didn't enjoy it at all. I couldn't do it indoors because it was too messy. I had to cut it with a handsaw. I didn't want to do it outside because it was too messy. It's not heavy enough to hold itself in position, so you've got to kneel on it, you've got to hold it down with one hand, you're sawing with the other hand. I couldn't have took the film with another hand. I don't have another hand, I'm not a gene stealer. It was cutting and cutting. Bits were going everywhere. I put the whole block in the end in a bin bag and sawed it inside the bin bag. I couldn't even see what I was doing, but it kept most of the bits that came off, you know, contained. But in the end, I cut the block in half. As you can see, I'm getting better with this pointing malarkey, aren't I? So, yeah, I had that. But I thought, it's going to be a bit boring, because my first plan was just to sort of cut it with this. I normally use this on cheese. I don't really. But a hot wire cutter. Cut it into a mountain shape, you know, shave it, mountain style-y, and then paint it. And I saw some of the things people were making for this terrain challenge, and I thought, these are very interesting. These are really cool. A mountain's just going to be a bit boring. So I also had in my drawer a block of this Super Sculpy. I've not used it yet before though, so I thought I want to give this a shot. So I thought, why don't I make a big orc carving in the side of the mountain? Oh, I'll do it like a face. Yeah, like an Easter Island statue style face. And that basically ended up being multiple heads in the side of faces in the side of the mountain, a la Mount Rushmore. Went through a few choices for names, and in the end settled with, I think was the best one by far, by Roxy the Riveter, which is Mount Krushmore. So yeah, let's have a look at some of the sculpting I'd done. Now this was the first one I'd sculpted. Now bear in mind, I have got a video on as I sculpt the fourth head. It didn't really enter my head to do a video on it, to be honest with you. I was just sort of fannying around. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. Like I say, I've not done this before. But this was the first head. I didn't want it looking too organic. It was quite smooth. So I went over it with a knife afterwards and tried to file more flat surfaces on it, so it looked like it was, you know, chiseled from stone. The teeth on there, which are also Super Sculpy, ended up, I pulled them out and left it with no teeth, and I thought I'd do with teeth a different way because they were just getting squashed and they were losing the edge and what have you. But I was quite pleased with that. I basically made the shape of the head with a tinfoil ball and then covered it in that Super Sculpy, and then once it's finished you pop it in the oven for about 20 minutes and yeah, comes out really hot and still a little bit soft, but when it cools it's rock hard. And I've since had to snap a bit of ear off one of these, and it took a bit of effort. Not impossible, but you know, I find it would be very difficult to do it accidentally. So I'm really impressed with Super Sculpy. So this was the first head. I do think I get better as I go on. This was the second one. At this point I'm not even putting the teeth in because they're going to be added later. I wanted to go for just a different shape, so I made this head a bit longer and thinner. Heavier brows, but the same sort of basics, you know, make a ball or a shape with the tin foil, put a layer of skin on it, essentially with the Super Sculpy, probably just 3mm thick, thereabouts, and then build up the areas where you want to build up, like the jaw, the upper lip, eyeballs, nose, eyelids, brows, ears, cheekbones were all done separately. There's the third one. So this one looks this is before I've put his bottom lip on, or his ears. I think with this one, I started thinking, hang on a minute, I'm getting better at this. This is looking a bit better. Now I wanted him to have a bionic eye, so I was just basically rolling the Sculpy out and cutting the square out with a knife. And then carefully, just to try and not rough up the edges, clean edges, pick it up and lay it over where I wanted it. I went on to put some plates on his head as well, with the screws in the head type look. Only give him one ear as well, the other ear's bionic. So here's a bit video of when I was doing the fourth one. There you see, just made the rough shape of the head I wanted. I thought it was something different. I'll have this one with his mouth open, and the back of the head I was trying to keep flat so it would fit on the mountain better. To be honest, if I'd thought about it, I would have had it angled more because the mountain was angled and I had to dig into it a bit. Then I'll just take little balls of Super Sculpy, squash them out and push them in. And the idea is to fully coat this with the Sculpy. This Super Sculpy's mint, it really is. It doesn't dry out. I left some of them sitting there for about 4 or 5 days without any sort of detrimental stuff. I went back and I was able to change it, still work with it. And once it's cooked though, like I say, it sets really hard. So I've done the mouth here first, and then went round the rest of the head, using some sculpting tools to push eye sockets in. There you go, it's a basic head shape. Then just roll some little balls, tiny little balls, and drop them into the sockets. And you're left with this disturbing image. I added some eyebrow ridges just to make sure you look furious. And I find this modelling tool, I know it's mostly for making sockets and what have you, but I find it really good for sort of smoothing down areas and blending a new piece into the existing bit. Adding some really thin sausages just under the eyeballs for lower eyelids, and also some extra slightly thicker sausages on the forehead for wrinkles on the brow. Then just making like a little pyramid, I suppose, of a Sculpy. And cut yourself to make a nose. Now I like my Ork noses to be fatter at the top and taper down. For years I drew them the other way around. But you push the nose on, squash it in. And I was putting a few, again, tiny little rolls just on top of the nose, just going up through the eyebrow, between the eyebrows, just to sort of like represent, you know, a wrinkled nose. Smaller tool just to sort of blend that in. Now it's just a matter of cutting some nostrils in with a knife, as you can see here. So use that tool again just to make the filtering. There you go, looks a bit like a pensioner. And here I'm just adding on some cheeks, just giving them some implants. I do like an Ork with a high cheekbone. A little bit too handy pandy here, mine, so smooth that out. And do the same to the other side, and as you can see the face is starting to take a bit more shape. Adding a bit more detail to the brow here, and you can keep sort of, you know, smoothing this in with a sculpting tool. I mean, you could use your finger really, but I try to use a tool for most of it. And if there's anything really fine, just use a knife blade. You can score the lines in. I was using the back of the knife blade for a lot of it, to be fair, because it's a bit thicker and makes a better line. Sometimes a really sharp blade, like on an X-Acto knife, will just slice the clay Sculpy and you know, you won't even see it because it's such a fine line. So if you use the back of it, or if you've got some old blunt knife blades, there is a use for them. It's really useful to have something like that around. You might have a proper sculpting knife, but I didn't. And for this level of stuff, I don't really think it's necessary. But when you get the detail on the brow, there we go, it ends up looking a bit like that. And just slicing some off that block of Sculpy there. I've got to say, it was very satisfying to slice off a block with a sharp knife. It was like one of them videos where you see people cutting sand and it starts to crumble. It was really nice. So I was using the tool here to go down his throat and basically sculpt out a uvula at the back of his throat, as well as putting some ridges on the inside of his mouth. I also need to add a tongue since his mouth was open, so I've just done that separate. Rough tongue shape, put the score line down the middle, textured it up slightly, and then bent it to a, I think it's what's scientifically known as wobbly tongue shape, and then stuck it in the back of his mouth, which ended up like this. Quite pleased with that. So at this point I've started putting the teeth in the head. The teeth themselves are just made from green stuff because I could make that and they would go hard, and I could put them in the Sculpy whilst it was still soft and work with them without fear of bending the teeth or anything or ruining them. I just made lots of little short ones for generic teeth like that, and I also made some tusks as well. I made quite a few. I've still got loads spare, to be honest with you. Some of them got fingerprints in, but you know, what are you going to do? And then I think this was my favourite part of the whole build, to be totally honest with you, was just picking up the teeth and pushing them into the gums. I mean, he's still missing his bottom lip, but yeah, a lot of fun. Had a couple of sort of pilot holes, I suppose, you know, put in first, just where I wanted the main tusks to go, just so I knew not to put the little teeth, not to crowd that area too much. So when I was ready to put the main tusks in, it was nice and easy. You've got to work them around a little bit till you find the right place. You'll know just by looking if it's too far forward, too far to the side, if it needs rotating. There's them with all these chompers. All this handling's putting more and more fingerprints on it, but like I say, I'm going to see if I can sort the texture out at the end. Next, I roll another sausage, a fair sized sausage, because this is his bottom lip. I also decided to go in on what was the gum and just make indentations between each tooth. Just something I've always done when drawing cartoon sort of monsters with big teeth is to show the gums are literally bulging with the teeth. I think I saw it in a Ghostbusters, the real was it the real Ghostbusters? It was a Ghostbusters comic when they were based on when Egon had white hair from the cartoon, the original cartoon. That's when I was seeing a big clown with big lips and teeth like that and gums like that, and it sort of stuck in my head as a kid, and that's how I always used to draw them. So I went round and patterned these gums anyway. Once that's on, you can add the lip. And you're basically just putting the lip where the lip goes, cutting off any excess. And then just blending it in, which you can, like I say, mostly do with your fingers, to be fair. Now I prefer the lip to be thicker at the front than at the side, so I'll be smoothing down the side bits here, so it's less prominent. There you go, Satsu with a lip on. He's not in a huff, he's just got his lip on. So the last thing to do with this particular head was some ears. Now the ears are tricky. I didn't really settle on I think every head had a different style of ears. And the ones I enjoyed doing the most were on the mech head because he only had one. But I never really settled on I didn't crack ears, I didn't dominate ears. It's just a sentence I never thought I'd have to say. But I would start, this is the best I think I got with the actual forming of the ears, which was to start out with 2 equal sized balls, form them into triangles roughly ear shaped, thusly, and then just flatten down the middle section where the membrane is, leaving it built up around the lobe and the cartilage. Again, though, because these are orcish sculptures in stone, it doesn't really have to be perfect. Don't worry about squashing out the membrane too much, you know, expanding it out past where you want it to be. You can always trim it away with a knife, and you want to put some jagged bits on there anyway, where he's been cut and shot and maybe even chewed. Although the size of an orc's ear compared to the size of an orc's mouth, if another orc's biting somebody's ear off, they're going to take off the skull with it, so, you know. There you go. Ears. Now you go a little bit more fiddling around with it until I was happy, and yeah. Okay, now you see I stuck one of the teeth, which is quite straight, and give him one of them, like an earring in his left ear. Just as an extra bit of decoration. Now, obviously that was a sculpt in the fourth head. I'd done the same process for heads 1, 2 and 3. Started off with a ball of tin foil, adding the Super Sculpy on to make like a skin, so you've got a ball in itself with some of the basic bits on it, the eye holes and what have you, maybe it's a bit bigger on the chin. And then after that you just keep adding tiny little bits of Sculpy as you go, for the nose, the top lip, the philtrum, the cheekbones, the ears, the brows, you know, just build it up. I do think I got better as I went on. Each head seemed to be a little bit better than the one before. The first one here is a bit of a potato head, but he had a metal plate, he's got a scar. I tried to do some little chips on him. I was still very pleased with him at the time, to be honest. The second one, I'm with some great big green stuff tusks. I also like the scar on him, and his ears weren't too bad, to be fair. The third one, the mech fella, I just had to make some bolts out of the Super Sculpy and just screwed screws directly into his nut. He's got a look of a meek on. He definitely looks clever, this orc. He's a bit shifty. And of course the fourth one there. This is a great thing with Super Sculpy. If you do make a mistake, wipe it off. Just go and it's gone. Start again. And you have no sort of time limit. I find with green stuff I sometimes go, green stuff. You know, I've only got 4 hours. Whereas with Super Sculpy, the first head, done it over 2 nights. And I'd done all 4 before I went and put anything in the oven. And the first head was probably a week old at that point. And I still went back and I changed bits. Shaved the odd sort of like rounded surface with a sharp knife just to give it like more of a flat, rocky feel. It was supposed to be carved from stone. Yeah, and once I baked them in the oven, like I say, they came out rock hard, brilliant. Really do like Super Sculpy. I think it's my favourite thing to sculpt with. I don't like milliput. I use it, but I don't like it. I like green stuff to a degree. It can be quite frustrating though, but Super Sculpy, absolute pleasure to work with. The only downside is you do need to bake it in the oven to cure it, with it being like an oil-based clay. That means that you can't just... I couldn't put a beard on somebody with Super Sculpy and go, that's a great beard, pop them in the oven and come out with a perfect beard and a puddle of plastic. You know what I mean? You've got to do it separate. That's the only downside. So some sort of armature with tin foil or wire. Anyway, matter fine. Now when it came to the mountain itself, I started off with this. This being a piece of the polystyrene block that I cut in half. Now as you can see, it's a nice even cut on left and right, and yet jagged as hell in the middle because I lost my temper and just ripped it in half at the end. I just couldn't be bothered. I got the right cob on. So there you go. It didn't matter anyway because I was going to be cutting it with the hot wire cutters. Now to that end, technical issues. I've lost the few photographs I took when I was actually cutting the mountain. I know I took them, but I don't have them anymore. So God knows where they've ended up. It was pretty straightforward though. So I've prepared a live demonstration with a bit of off-cut polystyrene here. And my wire cutters, which should now be heated up. I'll just unclamp that to give us a bit more wire. There we go. So basically, it just cuts through. Nice and easy. You just pull it, bit gentle. I'll keep my finger on there in case it unplugs. And there you go. So if you want to make another face on that rock, you can do just by and then we'll have it coming out, and then we'll go back down a bit, and then the sharp exit. It's as easy as that. But I'm going to stop playing with this now, because, unfortunately, just unplug that, I'm not willing to make more than 2 cuts with it without getting fully masked up. The fumes it gives off are quite bad. I've got the window open at the minute, I'm right next to it, and like I say, just those 2 cuts. Yeah, just like an airbrush, mask up. Well, this is what I ended up with, and those heads now fully baked are on the mountain in a kind of test fit. Great thing about them having tinfoil backs is even after they're fully baked, you just ram a cocktail stick into the back of it, and then you can stick it on the polystyrene and have a bit of a test fit. I want to make sure I got the order right, the height right, you know, all that sort of stuff. And being able to reposition them and actually have a look and have a think was pretty invaluable. And here you can see a little bit of smudge smeared behind one of the heads. This is the dreaded milliput. So yeah, as you can see, I've done this on all the heads and just tried to sort of keep it in, you know, match the cuts around it in the polystyrene to sort of blend it in a bit. Then, because I was going to prime it with aerosol primer, and I figured polystyrene would probably react not too well with it, I give it a full coat of Mod Podge. Now, the thing with this polystyrene is it's white. And the thing with Mod Podge is it's white. So painting white on white, I might miss a bit, you know what I mean? So my fellow odd boy, Clint from Essex Boys, suggested putting a little bit of paint in the Mod Podge just to change its colour so you can see exactly where you've done it. So I put some mocha brown in, because quite frankly I've got no other use for mocha brown. I mean, there's only so many coffees you can paint for orcs. Just so I could give it a full coat, and I knew exactly where I'd painted it, just so when I then primed it wouldn't all dissolve into a little pile. Once it was sprayed black with High Coat Matte Primer, the odd boy's choice, I then just started dry brushing it in dark shades of brown leading up to lighter shades of brown. Now this was just with general acrylic paint you'd buy from an art store, stuff that you'd pay like a couple of £1 for, and you would get a vast tube of several 100 millilitres of it. It's not the best quality, but quite frankly I wasn't going to be using 3 tubs of bloody Mornfang brown or something to do this, no way. And it ended up like that. So at this point I'm thinking, alright, I'm done. And I thought, nah, it just looks a little bit monochrome, doesn't it? It's just one shade. So I thought, well, how can I sort of add a splash of colour? Graffiti, that was the first idea. Put some orcish graffiti on it, just around the base, which I never really done in the end, but I do plan on doing it. That's going to be added to the mountain as time goes on. Basically, if I have a game and an orc unit or character does something heroic or noteworthy, it'll be added to the mountain in the form of cave painting style graffiti. What I decided to do instead was, what I normally do when I'm trying to add a splash of colour to something, is add grots. Best way to do this, I figured, was with scaffolding. So I picked the head, which was most potatoey, the first one, and said, yep, this one's not quite finished. So I started sticking barbecue skewers into the mountain around the head. So I glued them on. Had to make planks for them to stand on, so out come the coffee stirrers. They were cut to length, chipped up at the edges, and a couple of them were glued together on those barbecue skewers again, which I halved. And then really, to be totally honest, I was given the bare wood a coat of skeleton horde, and that seemed to do the trick. Now I wanted to tie these together. I ended up settling with making my own rope, which I'd done like this. So each rope there, you can see one going from the black primer bottle to the grey on the left, and then over to the bobbin of thread, was 4 bits of thread, which I'd tie together at one end. Then I would twist up, much like rope, not too tight, and then blue tack it to something else so it was held straight and taut like a tightrope. Then I'd get that wood glue you can see in the background, which just happened to be lying about. I'm sure PVA would do, but that wood glue's a little bit stronger. And basically just squeezed a little bit between my thumb and forefinger, and then just wiped it down the length of the rope. Let it dry, And that was just giving us some lovely rope. See there, I've started putting around some of the joins, and there's a couple of little clamps just holding a crossbar on whilst the super glue dries. And that's the scaffolding. It's painted, it's got all its rope on, it's glued, it's in place. Now I did also want to put a tarpaulin on it. So I cut a small square off a Hessian shopping bag. I then coated it in Mod Podge, and I made a little frame here just for it to hang on. Obviously I tatted it up quite a bit as well. I put a hole in the middle and cut it into some loose threads. And I tried this before with PVA glue and it was a bit rubbish. And then Clint from Essex Boys suggested using Mod Podge, which I did, and fantastic. Really, really good. So that's the tarpaulin there just setting out to dry. I needed a crew as well though. I was going to put 3 or 4 grots on, ended up with about 7. Some of them were from the Mech Gun crew, which were just perfectly fine, carrying power packs and tools and what have you. Some of them, like that fellow in the front there, I swapped his shooter out for a sledgehammer, which came off the Baneblade kit, and his sword, I cut the sword blade off and on the pommel stuck a bit of sprue which I'd sort of carved into a very crude stone chisel. The little fella in grey next to him has a scratch build pickaxe, a bit of plastic card carved into a pick head, and then just a bit of plastic rod is the handle. And it went like that, you know, you can easily give somebody a hammer, and if you just chop the handle off the mace, especially if you use a pair of cutters, you've basically just made a little chisel already sharpened and everything. The fellow with the battery pack there, his left hand's out. I positioned it like that so he could rest it on one of the bits of scaffolding, and the fellow with the drill and the hand in the air, he's going to be on. And the fellow with the drill and his hand in the air, he's going to be on ear hole duty. So he's going to have his hand on the ear as he peers down to make sure that that ear hole he's just drilled is deep enough. I also wanted to use a grot with the stick bomb, and I carved away most of the stick bomb so it was just a handle, and he was going to be operating the winch. A winch on this crane. Very simple. It's a bit of checkerboard from the inside of a Chimera door. The main body is off a Baneblade. Don't even know what it was. I think there's some barrels stuck on it. There's the winch off the truck itself, and then there's just plastic rod and some plastic card eye bar, which was flimsy as hell because it's so thin. But when you glue it in place, obviously you've made a triangle, and a triangle is nature's strongest shape. So it's absolutely solid. Getting it stuck inside the Baneblade piece was a little bit tricky, so I basically just blobbed a load of medium thickness super glue in and then sprinkled some bicarb in, and within a few seconds it was set like rock. There's a crew all painted up. I just used a nice and quick skin recipe for this, which is Plague Bearer flesh with Bealtan green on top. So once we're done, I just had to put them on the scaffolding. You can see here I put the tarpaulin on the left and position them around. We've got the lad winding the winch, somebody there guiding up the drill which is coming up on the winch or possibly going down. That was just made from the killer can piece. Of course, from the other side, see the fella working on the ear holes. Very, very important job. Now, I'd always intended to have some way for the grots to get up and down from the scaffolding. First, I was just going to use a bit of that rope I'd made and knot it and hang it down. So I figured the winch is for the equipment, the grots just need a knotted rope. That'll be fine. But the problem is with knotting rope like that, is you'll find that in between each knot it gets a bit kinky. It'll be more like a zigzag, it'll be hard for it to hang straight. So I thought about tying little bits of rope around the bit of rope just to give the impression of knots. But again, that just seemed a bit... Altogether, the knotted rope idea, the more I thought about it, the more underwhelmed I was with it. So, just like on the conning tower I'd done on my battle fortress, I thought I'll just make some ladders. Just plastic rod going down with little sort of rungs put across them, a few rivets, and there you go. Not one long ladder from top to bottom, but you know how 2 or 3 ladders tied together, angles put in to make it look a little bit more rickety and what have you. And I was going to go with that. But again, after spending an evening on the Ork Community Discord group, Scar suggested I do a rope ladder. I thought rope ladder's quite good. I knew how to make rope, so I just blue tacked 2 lengths of rope to my cutting board. And again, I apologise at this point, the photos and progress shots of the rope ladder seem to have gone the same way as the mountain. I don't know where they are. But if you blue tack 2 lengths together, at the distance you want apart, cut some plastic rod. I actually painted the plastic rod first of all brown, and then went over it with just a Sharpie and just scored it with the side of the Sharpie to put like wood grain on. It's very nondescript, you can't really see it, but it just adds a little tad more depth than it would have had otherwise. And cut the bits of plastic rod in the sections slightly longer on the distance between the ropes, and then just super glued them along every centimetre or so. Once I'd done that, I went over with a little pot of snakebite leather, and just put a dot just to paint up where the rod had been cut, where it was shown white, and it just put them as a more of a colour associated with heartwood, you know, the inside of the wood as opposed to the bark, just to give it a little bit more of a woody feel. And that was it, really. Of course, if I was going to have this rope ladder, I had to have something hanging off it. And what better than the grot from the Stomper kit? Now, this unfortunate little fella's already in the perfect position. With his right arm hanging down by his side, I decided to give him something that was weighting him down. And after digging around a bit, found something which it looked like you could feasibly hold on to, yet would still cause him some effort climbing up with, a toolbox from the Baneblade kit. I also picked out the head which more suited the expression of stress and effort. Then it was just a simple matter of cutting the rung away from the rope, swinging it out, and gluing them in place. That's it. Mount Krushmore, I've got it here. It's a big piece. There's a little bit of Orkish graffiti there, which is basically Orkish phonetic language which says Mount Krushmore. What else is it going to say? And there's a little blue handprint which just shows that it's not being looted by Leonardo da Vinci, but it's got his mark on it. Now, the back is flat and it's black. There's not much going on around there. So the idea is, with the other bit, there, I'm going to put that back to back with it, and then I'm going to draw around it and cut that bit so it matches onto this. Once it's matched on, I'll then treat it like, its own piece from the front. The idea was to put some gun emplacements on it, like the guns of Navarone, and maybe making some kind of fancy dice tower. But then with the two pieces back to back, you could put them in the centre of a table. And if you had them separate, you could put them on the edges. A little bit of versatility. But at the minute, yeah, just a nice fair train. One bit I'm low-key pleased about is, you see the drill hanging off the crane? Ooh! Ha ha ha! I got you this time, gravity. So, just super glue on a bit of Jeweller's chain on the winch. So there you go, Mount Krushmore. Couple of weeks work for the 40k Ork Community Discord and Facebook Community Challenge. If you're not taking part in these challenges, why not? You definitely should. They're fantastic. If nothing else, it's a motivation you need. I've had so many awesome models come out of it. Things that I'd wanted to do, or I didn't even know I wanted to do, that I've got because of these. In fact, yeah, I think it's a must. I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for that challenge. This would be, as you see it now, but without the faces. It would just be a rock. It would just be a mountain. I'm going to put it down now because it's a bit big. It gets in the way a bit, doesn't it? But if it wasn't for these challenges, like I say, I would just have a rock. That would be it. I'd be like, that'll do. That's all I wanted to do. But the challenge helps push you a little bit further and try things that you wouldn't normally do. Take you outside your comfort zone. I'd never sculpted before. Now I've sculpted. Now if I need something like that, I've got not no fear, but less fear of just giving it a shot. And you only get better. Doing those 4 heads, I realised how much better I got through each one. And each one was barely a night's work. Barely. So, give it a shot, man. Give it a shot. Go on. Anyway, that's it. I hope you like the vid. I'm going to stick a little montage at the end of some proper shots of it, and just to see you out. And please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And why not share with your friends, eh? Thanks very much for watching. And until next time, take care. York, Mount Krushmore, couple of weeks work, February challenge in the York. I wanted it to be, you know, mountain shaped, craggy. Yeah, I'm going to cut this bit out because that is probably a gang sign as opposed to, you know, he's one of them mountain boys, shouldn't it? Sorry. But I've gone off topic a little bit there, haven't I?